Hey everybody, it is Sleepy Reader, aka Damien, back with some comic book thoughts to talk about some of the odd little comics or odd big comics that I've read recently. Sadly, I seem to have slowed way down on my reading. I'm not sure what that's about, but there you have it. I just haven't gotten around to stuff as quickly as I'd hoped. And this is certainly an odd batch of comics. First up, I've got Santos Sisters number 4, the fourth issue. The World is a Vampire. Um, this sort of cross between Archie comics and slightly druggy kind of. I'm trying to think of the right way to describe it. Anyway, I feel like it is toned down from the first few issues. It just feels a little less druggy, a little less, I guess, the modern version of Slacker, or whatever that, a little less Slacker humor. This would be easier to give to my daughter than some of the earlier issues, although I think she could handle any of them anyway. But yeah, just a little less mature. I still enjoyed it a lot. It's a lot of fun. Love it on this kind of paper. Um, and it's amazing how consistent the art is. These guys could get a job with Archie. They'd probably be a big improvement over a lot of the Archie artists. Although Archie has some great artists over time, but I don't know what the artists right now are like. Um, there's these classifieds, which I used to think were a joke until I found out that Colin from Loading the Cannon had some ads in here in the past. I don't think he's in here now. So I think all of these are real ads in here, which is intriguing since the commercial comics, the big two comics, don't have real ads anymore. Um, I don't know if that's a real ad there. I assume not. Um, Santos Sisters in President Schmesident. I want a big burger. Uh, so there's a nice little attitude in here, but it's pretty gentle, and we even get kind of a person who had given them their powers showing up. Um, yeah, it's mild fun. It's just mild fun, but I appreciate it. I get excited each time I see, hey, they've got another Santos Sisters issue out. Because it's very. I think it was originally self-published, and now it's published in some kind of connection with Floating World Comics, which is like one of the smallest publishers around. There was a comic book shop here in Portland. And speaking of Floating World Comics, when I was there just a week ago or so, they had this comic, which at first I was like, I'm not ninjas, more ninjas, no way, New York Ninja. But then I saw, it doesn't say on the cover, I must have opened it up, that it is by, written and drawn, colored and lettered by Charles Forsman, who did the Revenger comics, which I enjoyed a lot, which were kind of edgy, uncomfortable homages to kind of violent revenge movies from like the 70s. And so it turns out this New York Ninja is a ninja movie that was filmed in the 70s but never released. And the sound and the script were lost. So someone found the raw footage or got a hold, was given the raw footage. And so a new director came in and re-put it all together with voiceover people doing voiceovers and creating a script to go with the story. And so I need to look up that movie. And I guess Charles Forsman was so taken with the movie, so in love with it, that he contacted the small film company called Vinegar Syndrome and asked them to if he could do a sequel or a follow up, filling in some of the gaps from the movie. So maybe I would appreciate this more if I'd seen the movie. I felt like there's little bits of Charles Forsman weirdness, but the overall feeling was almost of like just a slightly wacky version of kind of a mediocre 70s comic in a way. Um, But I don't know. I definitely enjoyed the art. I like Charles Forsman's just slightly off art style and the coloring style and everything. But I didn't get into the story. Maybe my expectations were too high because of Revenger. But it just seemed like a kind of amateurish imitation of 70s things, which I suppose in some way is what at least this Charles Forsman is. He's done other comics with completely different styles, and I haven't read them. I've just flipped through them, and I wanted that Revenger style, so I didn't buy them. And I think one of them became or maybe more than one of them, but one of them was like a became a Netflix show's comic, The End of the Fucking World, if I remember correctly. Pardon my French. There's a cool image. So I can't really. You have to be a hardcore Charles Forsman fan, I think, to spend $12 on this. It is oversized. It's larger than a regular comic. It's on really nice paper. It's from Floating World, so it has that imprinture of something. I don't think this is a real ad here, although it does say order from vinegarsyndrome.com, and they are a real movie company apparently. But I assume you can't order these nunchucks and throwing stars from them. Okay, let's shuffle things around here. So, what I spent a lot of time this last week reading was Red Rocket 7, which is 7 issues. It's by Michael Allred with Laura Allred doing the colors. It's again an odd-sized. There's the Santos Sisters regular size comic. It's an odd size, kind of a square bound, kind of in the proportions of a record album, although not quite a vinyl record album, but not quite as big as a real vinyl record album. Maybe the size of a 10-inch, one of those 10-inch EPs. And it's about an alien who comes to Earth and gets very involved in the history of rock and roll, starting with Little Richard and moving up through the British invasion and David Bowie, and eventually kind of hanging out with, I always forget their name, and they're a local band here to Portland, the Dandy Warhols, and forming his own band that becomes really popular near the end of that history of the rock and roll up through the 90s. I think this came out in 97, 98. And it's interesting to me because I think shortly after this, Dark Horse did that Barry Windsor Smith Storyteller, which was also an odd size. I think they experimented a lot in the late 90s and early 2000s with different ways to do comics. And I don't think those sold well. I think people liked the regular size comics because I don't see people doing that much anymore, and definitely don't see Dark Horse doing it anymore. But so I was really excited about this. There's a lot of great visuals from Michael Allred. He has there's always that Michael Allred quality to it, but he has a very specific style in here where he's tried to sort of make very thick lines and reduce the amount of lines that are in the images that I really appreciated. Thought that was very cool. It's on a different kind of paper, and I think Laura Allred made some bad choices because of the paper without realizing maybe the effect on the paper in terms of the coloring. So you can see how some stuff gets lost and feels fuzzy. But by the last few issues, she seemed to have solved that problem, which I thought was interesting. I imagine that when she saw the printed issues, she adjusted the way she did the coloring. I'm not positive. Here, let me jump to like the last issue. It just seemed like it had less of those problems. So that's kind of an interesting thing when colorists perhaps don't know what format the paper is going to be in. They can't adjust the color for it. But overall, I really liked this format. I really liked this paper. And like I said, I was really excited by it from the visuals and the rock and roll aspect, the alien rock and roll star. That's a very Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. The Man Who Fell to Earth, so the whole David Bowie thing. But as he developed his background science fiction story to it, I felt a little disappointed. And just by chance, I'd happened to read a little bio of Michael Allred somewhere that mentioned that he is was raised Mormon and still essentially believes in his Mormon religion. And I don't know how much this informs that, but basically there are some aliens. Is that going to be an issue too? There's some aliens who, sort of in the galactic, in the greater galactic world, aliens who invented virtual immortality and offered it to all the other aliens. Like there's one particular alien scientist in here who did that, and but there was one planet that had such strong faith in their religion, they knew there was an afterlife, so they didn't want immortal life in our realm because they would pass on, which, that makes sense. But so then you might say the atheist aliens decided they had to kill all of these religious aliens. So that is what triggers the red rocket people to come to Earth, fleeing those evil atheist aliens. And that kind of, I don't know. I've been an atheist, I've been religious, I've gone through different phases and different points of view on religion, but the idea that atheists would want to just slaughter all the religious people is troubling to me. And I'm uncomfortable with that being sort of the theme underlying stuff. And I didn't feel like it was like a perfect fit with kind of this recapitulation of the history of rock and roll with our Red Rocket character interpolated into all the events. He basically works in studios, is a studio musician, goes on the road with groups like the Stones and the Beatles, and becomes very close with Mick Ronson from the Spiders from Mars era of David Bowie. And so mixing that in somehow, rock and roll and religion, and I don't know how much this story is reflected in stuff from the Book of Mormon, which I've never read. Maybe I should read that just to know what their religion is about. But yeah, it's just as likely, or more likely, I think, that people of various religious groups kill each other than atheists go around killing people. So maybe I was feeling defensive, even though I don't currently think of myself as an atheist. And just kind of like, I don't know, I tend to get picky about science fiction, and like I want it to make sense. So still, I think, I'm glad I have this comic and can look at all the drawings of all the different eras of rock and roll and stuff. But just reading it all at once, trying to connect all the dots, made it a little irritating to me. I wish other people would try this format. To be honest, I really love this format. I kind of wish Michael Allred would have played longer with this particular style. He does interesting things where there's always kind of a background stripe, but it changes. Oh, there, we don't have it there. It changes shape and size over the course of different books and different volumes. I'm just picking them out at random now. Let's see. There's just a beautiful image. But they're killing these aliens who want to kill them. They're killing but they're supposedly the righteous religious people somehow. But they're killing the aliens kind of out of hand. The aliens want to capture them and question them so that they can find the rest of this religious group of aliens. Of course, the religious group of aliens look like humans. The good guys look like humans. So it just seems a bit of a muddle on its kind of religious moralistic side. Now, I watched a video by Gore Vidal where he talked specifically just about Red Rocket 7 and heaped praise on Michael Allred in general, which I think is much deserved, uh, especially for his art and his aesthetic, I think. But um, but Gore said that this was about the Cold War, and I didn't see that at all. Maybe I should, maybe on a reread sometime, because I went back and watched Gore's video again, so I didn't have Gore's idea that this is about the Cold War in my head while I read it. Um, yeah, so I don't know if it didn't sell well, or maybe it did sell well, but it seems like they didn't do more projects like this, so I assume it wasn't a great seller for Dark Horse. Um, if that was because of the story kind of getting too weird with the various elements, or because of the format, or maybe people didn't yet dig Michael Allred's art. Um, so anyway, it's a fascinating comic book. Um, Fascinating in a different way. I read two different issues, random issues of late in the run of the Savage Sword of Conan the Barbarian, when Roy Thomas came back to write. I think he maybe was the writer on, maybe I'm just guessing, the last 30 issues of Savage Sword of Conan, and these are more expensive when you track them down, or generally I've found to be more expensive when you track them down, either online or at comic book stores. The distribution was much lower at that point. Someone at a store explained to me that for whatever reason this book lost its newsstand distribution, so it was only available at comic book stores. Although you would think by the 90s that wouldn't matter. Um, Although maybe this is during the period where the comic book stores were already going down. This issue number 216 is from 1993, and it's got an odd thing, which is it's script by Roy Thomas, but adapting a short story that Tennessee Williams, before he was Tennessee Williams, when he just used his regular name, published in Weird Tales of all places, the famous playwright. So the prologue of the story, which is drawn by Alfredo Alcala, kind of in charcoal, or what looks like charcoal, is essentially the Tennessee Williams story about magical happenings in Egypt, which they just changed to be Stygia, the country in the Hyborian Age that Conan deals with. And then, so Roy Thomas used that as a prologue, and then the rest of it is drawn by E.R. Cruz, and Roy Thomas made up this story about kind of centuries later, some kind of aftermath of that magic event. And I love the E.R. Cruz art here. He is a really good artist for Conan. He kind of makes Conan's legs really big. But otherwise, I really like the way he draws Conan, and the really nice gray tones, and I don't know. There's a lot of energy and spark to this. Roy Thomas's script is a little bit baggy, and he could set things up better for what happens later, but essentially it's kind of cool because there's a couple different groups of people who are after the power left over in these crystals from the prologue written by Tennessee Williams, and one of them is perfectly happy to sacrifice her daughter, to get the magic power, and Conan is trying to rescue the daughter, and for some reason he's told the mother he will return the crystals to her, but he will rescue the daughter first. So there's a bunch of twists within twists in the story, but they're just not set up perfectly. I don't know if it's because it's later Roy Thomas and he wasn't trying as hard, or I wonder if the way comics were made by 1993 might have been different, like the way that he collaborated with the artists went differently than when he was collaborating with Barry Smith or John Buscema. That's just a guess. It's still a really cool story. Was there anything else in this issue? there's there's no other comics in this issue, and other than reading Roy Thomas's ramblings, where he explains the origins of the story, I haven't read the other stuff. There's an interview with someone named Bill Barker. I don't know. I'm not sure what that is, so I have to go back to that. Uh, yeah. So anyway, that was really fun for me as a fan of, particularly of the art, but even more as a fan of the art. This has a really crazy cover. Um, all these people trying to grab Conan, all the different legs and stuff. But this is the issue with a full length, illustrated by Alex Nino story written by Roy Thomas called The Lions of Corinthia. And it also, it's based, what did Roy Thomas say? It was based on some other story. It's based on a story that Robert E. Howard wrote about the Crusades, a siege in the Crusades. But anyway, it's a good story. And if you're not familiar with Alex Nino's art, it's kind of it's really wild. I think he never took off as a he's more of a cult favorite than a widely popular favorite. But I think those who love his art really love it, and I do. And so every page is a double page. They're a double page spread, so the continuity moves across every page. There's no ads, so they could do that without fear. So every page, and it takes a little work to interpret, but there's so much detail on every page. There's so much to be seen that it's worth putting in the work and following the continuity. Perhaps with a colorist could have clarified a few moments. The other sort of, you could say, downside of Nino is he's so into the overall composition that the focus isn't always really on Conan. Conan isn't really more of a visually strong character on the page than the other characters. But it's just so good, and as you get more acclimated to following his paneling across these double page spreads and seeing how he kind of varies his drawing style so much from different panels. I mean, there is some consistency to the drawing style, but he just does interesting different things. It's like he's constantly experimenting. There's kind of just a joy of inky drawing in here. And the story, again, I kind of found that Roy Thomas could have set it up a little bit better. But basically, there's these twins who've been separated from birth as part of a peace treaty, but they are magically connected to each other. And the blinding and then death of one of the twins has a powerful effect on the other twin and allows her and Conan to set up an interesting magical form of revenge. The Conan there's less wenching in these later. This issue is 228, so very near the end of the run. This Savage Sword of Conan ends at 235. And even in that previous issue, there's even a comment where he tells the girl, maybe when you're older. I'm not sure how old the girl was supposed to be, but I don't remember that in other Conan stories where he tells some attractive young girl, let's wait a bit till you're older. Maybe when you're older, I might, wine and dine you or something. So you can see there, Conan is kind of a little bit sketchy almost, along with all the other characters. So I love this kind of thing here. The different, there she's all in white. There's less detail, less scratchy detail. And there's a very different kind of inky approach there of this character that Conan's fighting. But Conan almost recedes into the background even as he's fighting these guards. Those are the guards. Yeah, he's smashing through a door and fighting some guards. So it's a very kind of specific, unusual kind of storytelling art, but God bless Alex Nino for staying so unique. And I guess, I don't know if he appeared again. They say in the letters column that they're hoping to get another story from Alex Nino, but I guess this is the first time he did a Conan story since maybe in the very early issues, hundreds of issues before in Savage Sword of Conan. So, if you're an Alex Nino fan or a fan of just unusual art, search out issue 228 of Savage Sword of Conan. Finally, another really good read. I've only read, this is there's a lot of collections of Junju Ito short stories, and I think this one came out just recently, or it's the first time I'd seen it. I grabbed it at Floating World. And it's got a lot of short stories, and I've only read the first short story, which is about 60 pages. There's the table of contents. There's the kind of title page of Tombs, is the title story. And it was very it was very creepy. It's about a brother and sister who go to visit a friend of theirs, and they run over a girl, and they decide, and as they're putting her in the car to take her to a hospital, she dies, and kind of off the page, it becomes clear they've decided to just cover up her death. They've put her body in the trunk of the car, and I'm not spoiling too much. This is right at the beginning of and when they get to the town, they find it is full of tombstones everywhere, like in the streets, and I don't want to give away too much, but eventually they discovered the unusual sort of magical nature of this town, where wherever the body dies, a tombstone rises up. But that creates all kinds of problems for them, and eventually the person that they run over is discovered missing, and the whole town is out searching for them, and it just gets scarier and scarier. And there was a point at which I didn't want to turn the pages. I was slightly reluctant, slightly wimpy, was afraid of what would happen next. And then I did keep turning the pages, and I survived, and that there's kind of a relief at getting to the end of the story and handling the horror of it. And there was the ending. The actual ending had another, was very sad, but it wasn't quite as horrifying. Like, I got past the feeling of dread, so I dealt with the sadness of it all. It's a very grim world. Underneath what at first just seems like a nice little world, teenagers want to visit their friends, brother and sister getting along, people having little crushes on each other, and then there's this just horrible world underneath all that eventually maybe swallows everyone up in one way or another. So that was very cool. So I'll call it quits there. Hopefully I'll be back with another video soon. I don't know. I just seem to have trouble finding time to do them all. All the ones that are in my head don't end up here. There's some people I need to do some hangouts with. Still planning to do sharing our favorite Superman covers with Naman and Roger from Metarog and the comic book worm. So hopefully we'll be doing that soon, but I got to get my act together so I can do that with them. I have to go over to my storage unit and search through the boxes for the Superman comics. I know I have a lot of them together, so hopefully that won't be too hard. Anyway, I hope you all are doing well, enjoying reading your comics when you find the time to, and that your summertime isn't too broiling hot. Talk to y'all later.